Hello friends! Another showcase recently wrapped up and it was the III initiative. So today I wanted to go over all these amazing announcements. And let's start with my personal top 5. One of the coolest reveals from this year's III was Don't Starve Elsewhere. It looks like Klei Entertainment is sticking with the survival crafting formula people already love. But they're adding some fresh ideas on top too. The game will feature new biomes, new climates, new resources, and a procedurally generated world full of danger. There is also a new hazard system called the Fog, which also sounds pretty nasty, but looks like it also hides some interesting secrets. On top of that, the visual seems a bit more polished, the signature art style is still there, and yes, it's going to have a full multiplayer, just like Don't Starve Together. The only downside right now is that we still don't have a release date yet, or any pricing details. Still, this feels like a really big one. The developers have a ridiculously strong track record with this series. Both the original game and the multiplayer sequel still have overwhelmingly positive reviews and strong commercial numbers. And this doesn't look like a risky reinvention. It looks more like they're building on something that already works really well. The only thing that could go wrong is the fact that the market is a little oversaturated with survival and sandbox games right now. But Don't Starve has always had its own identity. So personally, I think this one has a very good chance of being yet another hit. Are you excited for the new Don't Starve game? Because I sure am. Another standout announcement was Valor Mortis, which finally got a release window of fall 2026. In case you missed it, this is that Napoleon-era first-person Souls-like set in an alternate 19th century Europe, where war and a supernatural plague have completely twisted the world. Along with the release window, we also got some new gameplay footage, and from what we've seen so far, the game looks seriously well polished. The previews have been very positive too, and more than a few people are already calling it a potential sleeper hit. Now, do I think it's a Game of the Year contender? Honestly, I'm not totally sold on that yet. What I do think is that it has a very real shot at becoming one of those well-respected mid-tier action games that people end up loving. The biggest challenge is probably the gameplay style itself. First-person melee combat is tricky to get right, and it usually has less mainstream appeal than third-person action. On top of that, it's a brand new IP, which means it doesn't have the built-in pull of an established franchise. So yeah, I think there is probably a ceiling here. But if the game lands even reasonably well, it could open the door for more first-person Souls-like in the future. And honestly, that alone makes it a really interesting project to watch. We also got a fresh look at Alkahest, and this time it was the game's first proper gameplay reveal. If you haven't seen it before, Alkahest is a medieval action RPG focused on melee combat, interactive environments, exploration, and alchemy. And from the footage, that all seems to be front and center. There is a lot of close combat, plenty of environmental interactions, different goblin encounters, and a big emphasis on reactive systems. The developers have also said they're going for quality over quantity. So instead of a giant open world, they want a smaller world that feels dense, polished, and full of secrets. They've also named Dishonored and Dark Messiah as inspirations, which is a pretty strong pitch on its own. The bad news is that there is still no release date. That said, this looks like another really strong AA project. The kicks, the finishers, the environmental combat, the alchemy, all of it really looks super promising. It probably won't be a mega blockbuster, and realistically, it doesn't really need to be. For a smaller, newer studio, the goal is more about making something polished enough to build a loyal audience. And if they can pull that off, I think this game could absolutely do well enough to put the studio on the map. Cairn is already getting a lot of attention, and now it's getting its first free DLC as well. The DLC is called On the Trail Deep Water, and it is the first entry in the planned On the Trail series. It's adding 3 new climbing areas, each with their own challenges, and it also looks like it will introduce climbing over water, which should make things a little less stressful if falling has been your biggest fear. It is set to launch in summer 2026, so the wait shouldn't be too bad either. Honestly, this DLC is a very smart move. For a game that was supposed to be more of a small indie release, Cairn has made a pretty serious impact. It sold 200,000 copies in just 4 days, and it's been getting a really strong response from both critics and players with very positive Steam reviews. So instead of treating it like one and done release, the game maker seems to be investing in it as something with a long-term potential. And to be fair, I think they probably could have charged for this DLC and people still would have bought it. But making it free is a great way to build goodwill, keep players engaged, and strengthen the game reputation even more. Also, quick thing, if you don't know who I am, my name is Alex, I'm a game producer, and I'm here to help you get caught up on everything that's going on in the video game industry. And the last game that caught my attention was Long Gone. If you like pixel visuals and post-apocalyptic stories with a bit of The Last of Us energy, this one might be for you. It is a 3D pixel narrative adventure set in an abandoned suburban neighborhood, decades after an outbreak. You explore, solve environmental puzzles, uncover the stories of the people who used to live there, and do it all with your cat companion by your side. And yes, there are zombies. The game is currently planned for 2027. What makes this especially interesting is that it's apparently being made by a solo developer, and it had already passed 250,000 wishlists before it even showed up at AAA. That's kinda huge, as for indie games getting attention is often the hardest part. The real question now is whether the final game can deliver on that interest, especially with such a small development setup. And personally, even though pixel graphics usually aren't my thing, I have to admit this looks really good. The atmosphere is strong, the concept is strong, and the non-combat zombies tension is a nice touch. If the story lands, this could be a very solid game. Now, of course, there was a lot more stuff announced during AAA initiative, so I'll leave the link down below if you want to check out the rest of the announcements. And in the meantime, let's move on to the rest of the industry. Now for a bit of a weird one, State of Decay 3 will apparently not have zombie animals after all. And yes, that means that the terrifying zombie deer from the original trailer is basically off the table. According to Undead Labs' head, Philip Holt, when the game was announced back in 2020, it was still incredibly early in development. It was basically just a Word document concept with only 4 or 5 people on the team, so that trailer was developed without any kind of gameplay. And as development progressed, some of those early ideas just didn't survive, which includes undead animals. Unfortunately, Holt didn't say much else about other features, so things like a snow biome or camping systems are still up in the air right now. But honestly, I think this is the right time for them to reset expectations like this. As a person who works in this business, I know that these kinds of things happen all the time in game development. Studios throw around ideas early, test them, cut what doesn't work, and hopefully end up with something better. I have to admit, it can be a little disappointing when a cool idea gets dropped, especially one people remember so clearly, but I would still rather know now than find out much later. And from a communication standpoint, this is probably a smart move too. Better to be transparent early than let people build their expectations around things that were never truly locked in. And while we're on the subject of zombies, some of you should probably remember Plants vs. Zombies, a highly addictive game that rocked the world back in the day. And now, almost 20 years later, the company still struggles to produce the part 3. Now, fast forward to today, Plants vs. Zombies 3 Evolved is currently back in soft launch on iPhone and Android in Ireland and the Philippines, with a wider rollout starting in the UK and Singapore over the next couple of months. And what makes this especially wild is that it is basically the third time they've tried to launch this game. There were earlier soft launches in 2020 and 2021, then a broader one in 2024, and then the game got pulled out again for a major overhaul. And now here we are. PopCap has also made it clear that this version is still very early and features are still being reviewed and could change. And we don't talk about mobile games too much, but the struggle is real. Whether it is a AAA blockbuster or a mobile free-to-play game, it takes a lot to succeed right now. Which is why it's understandable why it takes so long for these guys to come up with a concept that works. And this game is honestly not in the worst possible state. This IP is still widely recognizable and has a decent fan base, so the opportunities to test and validate those ideas are definitely there. The biggest concern though is the internal pressure. I doubt that EA is too happy about the fact that their next Prime game is still not producing any revenue after 10 years of development. So let's hope they eventually rescue this franchise before the publisher pulls the plug. And that's all I have for you guys today. Let me know what your top pick is from the III Initiative showcase. What do you think about the State of Decay 3 ditching the zombie animals idea? And if you're a fan of mobile games similar to Plants vs Zombies. As usual, if you want to know more, all links are down below. And of course, clicking the like button helps this channel a lot, and I personally highly appreciate it. Thank you all for making it this far, and with that, Alex is signing off for today. Cheers!